Good morning, everyone. This morning we are studying the portion of bracha. Bracha in Hebrew is blessing. It's the blessing that Moshe is blessing the Jewish people before he died. And it's actually the last portion of the Torah. We never read it on Shabbat unless Simchat Torah falls on Shabbat, which I don't think it happens. It's always read on Simchat Torah. The following Shabbat, we read Bereshit. So being that in a week we will be studying Bracha, I would like to concentrate today and talk about the Bracha. Our discussion is from Likutei Sichos, the Rebbe's talk, the Rebbe's teaching, volume Lamed Dalet 34 in the book of Dvarim, and the portion of Bracha. Towards the end of the Chumash, the last few verses, the Torah is talking about the greatness of Moshe. The Torah tells us there was never been a prophet to the Jewish people like Moshe, from all the miracles and unnatural occurrence that he created, and also that he was the one who saw or knew God face to face, all the miracles, all the achievements that God had sent them to achieve in Egypt, to Pharaoh. And then the last verse reads, and all the strength and all the miracles that occurred in the great, awesome wilderness, which Moshe performed before the eyes of all Israel. And the topic of our discussion is before the eyes of all Israel. Le'einei kol Israel is the last three words of the 5 books of Moses. Here is the Rebbe. I'm going to read it from the text that's in Hebrew, and some of it I will give by heart. Al Apostle, regarding the verse, Ulechol hayad chazaka, with the strong hand that Moshe did in front of the eyes of the Jewish people, Siyoma v'chotma shel Parshas Bracha v'shel kol HaTorah, which is the conclusion of the portion of Bracha and the entire Torah. Mefaresh Rashi HaTeivot. Rashi explained the words Le'einei kol Israel in front of all the Israel. Shenesa'o libo, that his heart desired, lishbor haluchot, to break the tablets that God gave him, le'eineihem, in front of their eyes. Shenemar, as it's written, va'ashabrem le'einechem, I broke it in front of your eyes. Ve'iskim adat HaKodesh Baruch Hu ledaito, God agreed with his decision. Shenemar, as the Torah text teaches us, asher shibarta, God tells them regarding the tablets that you broke. The word you broke is interpreted Yishar kochacha sheshibarta, Yishar koach, that you broke. Thank you for breaking them. So Rashi says the last 3 words of the Torah is teaching us about the breaking of the tablets when the Jewish people worship the golden calf. And Rashi concludes that he did it in front of the Jewish people. He didn't do it in hiding or secretly, but he did it publicly. It was a dramatic event. And in addition, Rashi says that God is saying to him, Yishar koach, great for you for breaking the tablets. By doing so, God was appreciating. Now, there are many questions the Rebbe is asking. Number 1, says the Rebbe, Velichora tamua, something makes no sense. This interpretation in front of your eyes, which is the last words of the entire 5 books of Moses, the way Rashi interprets it, in front of your eyes, referring to the breaking of the tablets, it does not fit in the simple text. It's something that what we call drash, another type layer of interpreting the Torah, but Rashi is about the simple text. שהרי הכתובים כאן מדברים בשבחו של משה. We talk about the greatness of Moshe and his great achievements and closeness to God, וגודל מעלותיו and all of his great attributes. וכפירוש רש"י על הכתובים כאן, as Rashi is explaining regarding the text over here in the last few verses, אשר ידעו השם פנים אל פנים, few verses before it says that God knew him face to face. It says שהיה ליבו גש בו ומדבר אליו בכל עת שרוצה. He was very close with God, that he would speak to God anytime he wanted. All the other prophets, when God wanted to speak, he would come to them, and suddenly in the middle of the marketplace, they were going shopping for Shabbat, they would fall down and lose their mind, so to say, and God would come and bring a vision to them. This is the holy great prophets. Yet Moshe says, wait here, let me ask God. He can ask God anytime he wants. ולכל היד החזקה, and the strong mighty hand, the Torah says, שקיבל את התורה בלוחות בידיו, that God put in his hand the tablets. God himself placed a gift into his own hand, which never happened with anybody else. ולכל המורא הגדול, and all the great, awesome miracle, the simple interpretation is, ולכל המורא הגדול, ניסים וגבורות שבמדבר הגדול והנורא, great miracles in the awesome and dangerous desert. So it's all about his achievements, his greatness, his close to God. ואיך מתאים, how is it fitting, שלאחרי מעלות גדולות ונפלאות אלו, after so many great achievements and miracles, יסיים הכתוב, the Torah will conclude, לעיני כל ישראל, in front of the Jewish people's eyes, שנסעו לשבור הלוחות לעיניהם, that he goes and breaks the tablets. Breaking the tablets denotes something not positive, something not right. He damaged the Torah, he damaged the gift God gave him, and yet that's the pinnacle. You keep upgrading about his greatness, and then you end up the last words that in front of their eyes refer to breaking of the tablets, which seemingly is not a positive act. So that's the first question. ורש"י, שבפירושו על התורה לבעל הלפשוט של מיקרו, Rashi, when he's teaching the Torah, explaining the Torah, he's coming to explain the simple text, no more. אבל לפרש ככמה פשטני המקרא, he should have explained it like there are many commentators who explain, שלעיני כל ישראל, in front of the Jewish people's eyes, אינו עניין בפני עצמו, it's not another great achievement, אלא בא בהמשך ליד החזקה והמורא הגדול שנעשו לעיני ישראל. But it's a conclusion of what we just read, his mighty, awesome hand, and the mighty and awesome miracles in a great desert that he did it in front of the eyes of the Jewish people. In other words, he's not telling them what he has achieved, but all that we read about was done in public, was done in front of the Jewish people. Rashi took it not in a simple way, that it's not about the past, but it's another great achievement, that it broke the tablets. Simple text is that it's conclusion of what we just read, that in the desert, the mighty desert, he performed miracle. In Egypt, he had broken Pharaoh and forced them to let the people out. He's the one who spoke to God anytime he wanted to, and all that was done in front of the Jewish people. Instead, Rashi says, done in front of the Jewish people, not in the simple, but in the drash, which refers to breaking the tablet. The Rebbe brings the next paragraph that's why the commentators of Rashi also had problem with Rashi's interpretation, and they say that's why Rashi adds the caveat that God agreed and God said to him, Yishar koyach, thank you, because he wants to say that it was a positive act, and that's why Rashi adds that God agreed to it. But, says the Rebbe, this explanation makes no sense, or at least needs an understanding, שהרי סוף סוף בשבירת הלוחות עצמה הוא דבר בלתי רצוי והפך השבח לגמרי. Breaking the tablets, no matter what, is something negative. It's not a positive, it's not a special trait. And how is it possible that that's what the end of the entire Torah, according to Rashi, referring to something that he did that was not right? The Rebbe, the next two paragraphs, is saying that if you want to say something great about Moshe that God agreed to, and that's why you bring in the breaking of the tablets, there are many other things that Moshe did on his own, and God agreed and says, oh, you did something great. For example, preparing for the giving of the Torah, it says that God told them only one day or only 2 days to not be with the women and to purify oneself for God's arrival. And Moshe added another day. And God says, that's great that you added an extra day. In other words, there are many other things that Moshe did on his own. And God says, Yishar koach, you did a very good deed. But breaking of the tablets is a very negative act. Why is that? This is the example chosen to conclude the entire Torah. Yes.
A question: how do we know that Moses had a day? Where does it say?
You read in the Torah, in the text, that God says to him, today and tomorrow you should not come close to women. And God says, and Moshe says to them, one more day earlier. And finally, the Rebbe says, all the commentators say that's why Rashi says God agreed to show its greatness of Moshe. It's not in the text. In the text, it says that he performed something in front of the entire Jewish people. Rashi says, breaking of a tablet. And Rashi says, oh, and God said, yes, you did something right. It doesn't say, Leinei Kol Israel with God's blessing. It says, Leinei Kol Israel. The Rebbe asked a few more questions. We're going to go over them very, very quick before we get to the answer. Gam tzorich להבין. We need more understanding. Aleph, first thing. רש"י מדייק לומר לשבור את הלוחות לעיניהם, שנאמר וישבור לעיניכם. לפי שבזה הרמז בלשון הכוס ולעיני כל ישראל. אבל הגוף הטעם בו, מדוע בא כתוב לרמז את עניין שבירת הלוחות דווקא באופן השבירה שהייתה לעיני כל ישראל. שלכאורה אינו אלא עניין צדדי. It says that he did it in front of the entire Jewish people. Le'inei, ayin is eyes, in front of the Jewish people. Says the Rebbe, I don't understand. If the greatness is the breaking of the tablets, why is it all concentrated on the word of in front of the Jewish people? What if he broke the tablets not in front of them? The same achievement would have been happening. The Jewish people will see that they lost a gift from God. Yet, the whole concentration is about in front of the Jewish people, not about the breaking, but in front of them, in front of the entire Jewish people. There must be something unique about doing it in front of the entire Jewish people. Base, one other, something else. Rashi begins before Moshe broke the tablets, says Nesa'olibo. His heart desired to break the tablets and he broke them. What do you mean his heart desired? You can say he broke the tablets, so you know that's what he wanted. Nobody forced him. It should have said Bekitzur, in a much shorter, abbreviated, Sheshavar et haluchot, that he broke the tablets. Bet or al kol panim, if you want to say that he wanted to and he did it, say in his mind, he wanted to. Usually the mind is the one who makes decisions, not the heart. Rashi uses the word nasa'o libo. Nasa means lifted. His heart had raised his desire to serve God by breaking the tablets. Heart is not the right body part. It should have been omitted altogether. Even if you want to say that something drove him to do it, it's the brains, it's not the heart. Umikol anal, from all the above, mukhrach lomar, must be said, sheledat Rashi, according to Rashi, yesh ba'peula deshvirat haluchot atzma, the actual breaking of the tablets, inyan na'aleh biyoter, a much, much greater achievement, hamoreh al ma'alato v'shvuro shel Moshe, that shows the greatness of Moshe more than anything else he did, speaking to God anytime he wants, making miracles in Egypt and in the desert, bringing them the manna, heating or speaking to the rock to produce water. Nothing can be compared to one thing, which is breaking of the tablets. It is the highest achievements of Moshe. And therefore, says the Rebbe, that's why Rashi continued that God says, Yishar koach, God says, thank you, you did something great. It shows that this is one of the only time God thanked him. Nothing else we see that God says, thank you for doing it. In other words, it is the greatest achievement of Moshe.
What was the reasoning for Moshe?
And then the Rebbe says, the fact that this is come after everything else, you talk about in Egypt, in the desert, and he spoke to God, and then you, in other words, you climb in the greatness of Moshe. Finally, you reach the highest level of the greatness, which is breaking of the tablets. And God saying to him, Yishar Koach, must be that the breaking of the tablets is something that's nothing come close to the greatness of that express Moshe's greatness. What's the question?
The reasoning, what motivated him to break the commandments?
Because they worship the golden calf,
Yeah,
and he came
because of
in
the
found
second
him.
commandment, right?
What do you mean second commandment?
Well, it says
Thou shalt
Torah.
not, right,
Yeah.
yes.
And that him breaking the commandment saved the Jewish people, right?
Right, and that's what the Rebbe is going to speak about. But before, the Rebbe says, now it can explain one other question the Rebbe didn't speak about, but now we can explain it, and that is, Yadua Klal, there is a rule. In the Jewish tradition, we have a rule. Shemesaimin betov, you always conclude a project or a reading in a positive way. I think last week in class we spoke that there are sometimes the prophets are rebuking the Jewish people, and when we read them in Haftarah, in the Shabbat, if it ends up in a negative way, we repeat another verse from before to say, I want to finish in a positive way. Last week we spoke about the Azinu. It's a song, even though a lot of rebuke, this breaking of the songs into 6 sections is always ends in a positive way. Why? Because you don't want to end in a negative way. Now we have a question. Breaking of the tablet seemingly is a very negative act, taking away, breaking God's gift. How can you conclude the entire Torah, 5 books of Moses, if that after that there is nothing else? How is it possible? The conclusion of the entire Torah something that's totally undesirable. How can you finish with that? And this question, says the Rebbe, is about Rashi itself. Rashi takes the word shabarta, broke, and he explains that he's broke in front of the entire Jewish people, and God agreed. But how is it possible you explain the whole Torah, and the last explanation of the Torah is about breaking? Finish off with Leinei Kol Israel in front of the Jewish people, finish about miracles, finish about speaking to God, but can't you shouldn't be finishing the entire 5 books with the word you broke, which is negative. ועל כן צריך לומר, and therefore we must say, כנ"ל, as we mentioned before, שבשבירת הלוחות עצמה, the actual breaking of the tablets, יש עניין של מעלה ושבח גדול ביותר למשה. There is a great achievements and great greatness of Moshe, לכן מסיים את התורה בלעיני כל ישראל. That's why the Torah finished the words of the entire 5 books in front of the Jewish people, referring to breaking of the tablets, שנשאו לשבור את הלוחות, ולכן גם רש"י מפרש בפירושו על התורה בתפקא בשבעת ששברת. That's why the last Rashi is talking about breaking, because it's not negative, it's actually positive, and it's not just positive, it's the greatest achievements of Moshe from everything else he did. Now the Rebbe explains what's the positive about breaking the tablets. As Rashi explained prior, when we read about in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, in the portion of Tisa, we read about the golden calf and Moshe's breaking of the tablet. Rashi explained the reason why he broke. And Rashi, I'm going to give the summary here. Rashi says to him that there is, to illustrate what he had done, is like an example of a king who married a girl, and he sent he was betrothed to a girl, not actual married. And once she's betrothed, she went and befriended all the other maids which were in a lower class, and a very negative name was spread about that girl because people said that she was very loose, with her body, so to say. And the Shushvin, the marriage broker, the one in between the king and the future queen, stood up and decided to rip the ketubah, the contract of marriage between husband and between the king and the queen. Why? He says he wants to save the girl so that if there is something that the girl did inappropriately, she would say, I'm not yet married because there is no contract. I didn't sign the contract yet. So Moshe did. The Torah is a contract between the Jewish people and God, and we were betrothed to God. Once we receive the Torah, then we get married. And a negative name came out because the Erev Rav, those who came from Egypt, were participating in the golden calf, and they cheated. And therefore, Moshe ripped the Torah, which is a contract, so we can say, we did not receive yet and approve yet the marriage. Says the Rebbe, so there were two reasons Moshe broke the tablets. One, they don't deserve the Torah because the Torah is deserving to have people who have not disobeyed the Torah. And the second reason is to save the Jewish people so that God will not punish them. As long as they did not receive the Torah, the written Torah, there was not yet a room for them to be punished because they did not read the Torah yet, accept the Torah. Says Rebbe, the first explanation that they are not deserving the Torah because they cheated, they don't obey the Torah, is one reason only not to give it to them, but not to break it. Somebody gave you something to deliver. If you don't want to deliver it, return it back to the sender, right? UPS is trying to deliver, there is nobody home. After a few attempts, what they do is they take it back. They don't sell it on eBay. Moshe should have returned the Torah back to God. The only reason that can explain why he actually broke it is because he wanted to defend the Jewish people. It's not because they're not deserving. And therefore, we need to understand that when God says to him, Yishar koach sheshabarta, God thanked him, and he actually broke the tablets and did not return it to God. It's not because they are not deserving of the Torah, but because of saving the Jewish people. If they received the Torah, they would have been treated as in a much harsher way. Says the Rebbe, now, after we've gone through this example, this metaphor of the marriage broker that goes between the king and the queen, now we can explain why breaking of the luchot, of the tablets, is far greater than any other achievement Moshe did. Move on bepashtos, bepshuto shel mikros. Says the Rebbe, it's a very simple common sense. Godel v'yoker rakam shel haluchot. Everybody knows how valuable the luchot, the tablets are. Ubifrat beinei Moshe Rabbeinu, especially in Moshe Rabbeinu's eyes. Sharei haluchot ma'aseh Elokim me'imam michtav Elokim. Because the tablets are the act of God, a writing from God, a letter from God himself. Nobody else received it before, and nobody else will receive it later. He himself is the one who received it. It didn't fall from the sky. God put it in his hand on a mountain. In addition to his love towards Torah, because we call it the Torah of Moshe, here he gets the essence of the Torah from God directly. Nothing similar happened before or after. It's God's own writing, and God himself delivers it to the hands of Moshe. So the greatness of the tablets is, there is nothing compared to it. Still, Moshe Rabbeinu, שיש מקום לחשש שמציאות ממשלה לוחות שם בדוגמה לכתובה יכולה לפגוע בישראל חס ושלום, even though Moshe is the first and the greatest, the one that really understood the greatest of the Torah and experienced firsthand receiving it from God directly. And it's something that God himself gave it to him to deliver, but there is a possibility it will cause some hurt to the Jewish people, a greater punishment than they should receive. Lo hises klal uklal lerega, he did not hesitate for a moment. ואף לא שאל את הקדוש ברוך הוא, he didn't even ask God permission. ותכף הוא מיד שבר את הלוחות כדי להצילם מעונש. Right away he broke the tablets to save him from the punishment. ולא עוד, not only that, אלא ששבירת הלוחות הייתה כדי להציל רק חלק הכי קטן. It was to save a very small minor part of the Jewish people שהיה במצב ירוד ביותר שנכשלו בחטא העגל. That they were in such a low state that they worshiped the golden calf. In other words, it wasn't the entire Jewish people. It was a small group. Later on, we find out there were 3,000 men who were killed. They are the only people who worship the golden calf.
The statement, you shall live by the Torah, not die by it, does it apply in this scenario? Or
no, it's that statement would go the opposite. ואף על פי כן, and still the להגן עליהם לא היסס משה רבנו לשבור את הלוחות הראשונה. Just to save them, just to protect them, to defend. Only 3,000 from 600,000 men is a very small faction. He immediately, without hesitation, without God's permission, without consulting anybody, broke them. וזוהי מעלתו הנפלאה של משה רבנו, מנהיג ישראל. That's the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader of Jewish people. רואה נאמן של ישראל, a faithful shepherd of the Jewish people. לא זו בלבד שהפקיר את כל מציאותו כדי להגן על כלל ישראל. Not only that he was putting his own life on the line, as he told God, wipe me out if you kill the Jewish people. אלא עוד זאת, in addition, ששבר את הלוחות שקיבל מיד הקדוש ברוך הוא, he broke the tablets that he received from God's hands, בכבודו ובעצמו, directly, כדי להגן על אלה שנכשלו בחטא העגל, to save, to defend those who worship idol, which are the lowest of the low. ולא כן, now, therefore, לאחרי שהתורה מונה כמה וכמה מעלות גדולות, after the Torah enumerates great achievements of Moshe Rabbeinu that were unique to Moshe, and nobody else have ever done such activities. מסיימת התורה, the Torah concludes, במעלה הגדולה ביותר, in the greatest of all greatness of Moshe, that nothing is similar לעיני כל ישראל, in front of the entire Jewish people, שנשאו לו בליבו לשבור הלוחות, that his heart desired to break the tablets, which is greater even than receiving the luchot. Because before we read about Moshe's greatness, that he received the tablets from God's hands. The greater, even greater than that, is to break the tablets. Why? Because he's willing to put his life on the line and everything he has for the saving of another Jewish person. Now, says the Rebbe, that explains why it says Shenesa Olibo is heart desire, because it's an expression of extra kindness. Kindness, emotions are in the heart. What made them break the tablets? Not his mind, his heart. He was such a kind, compassionate, and he cared about the Jewish people so much that it drove him to such an extreme behavior. And that's why Rashi did not omit it. Rashi says, you know what motivated him? To put there everything he has to save another human being. And it came from the heart because of his act of kindness.
And he knew the outcome by breaking it, right?
He knew that he's taking a line because he's breaking something that's not his. There's a whole discussion. Who gave him permission? It's not his. Says the Rebbe, that's why the words are Nesa Olibo. Nasa is to lift up. His heart lifted him up above everything. Moshe is wisdom, is Torah. God couldn't pick anyone else to understand the Torah like Moshe. We know, Halacha Moshe Mishinai. All the entire Torah is already included in Moshe. So brains and understanding of Torah, nobody close to Moshe. Everybody else is very, very far. Light years afar. Says the Rebbe, that's why Rashi says, not just that his heart, not desire, but his heart lifted him up. In other words, he had to be above what is naturally behavior. Is natural is about brains, about wisdom, about signing of Torah. He needed to do something that goes against that, and that is to break it. And that's why his heart was motivating him to do something above and beyond what is natural desire. Now we understand why Rashi brings heart. That heart pushed him, and that's why Rashi says Nesa'o, his heart lifted him, because he had to be a natural act of Moshe. Says Rabbi, now I can explain why it was done in front of the Jewish people. It is Leinei Kol Israel, in front of all the Jewish people. Says Rabbi, because the idea of the love of a fellow Jew is so great that nothing else should stand in the way. Because there is no greater sacrifice than the entire Torah. And in the Torah itself, the tablets that God himself wrote and given to his hand, yet he broke it to save people who are so low in their relationship with God, to show us how careful we have to be about a fellow Jew. Finally, the Rebbe says we need to understand, we always follow the conclusion of the Torah. How can you conclude? Still, you're acting, it's an act of breaking, it's a negative act. Also, it's talking about the Jewish people descending to such a low level that they've never been to. The golden calf lowered the Jewish people to a point never been so far from God. That's why God really wanted to wipe them out, and only Moshe stopped it. How can you finish all 5 books of Moses, which is a gift to the Jewish people, about something that's the exact opposite of love towards God or connection with the Jewish people? Says the Rebbe that when God created the universe, he created it for 2 reasons, Torah and Israel and the Jewish people. And there is a debate, which one from the 2 is first? And the Talmud says that our rabbi says, I say Israel got it first. Why? Because you can't have study of Torah unless you have the Jewish people. And therefore the Jewish people are first idea, and then God created the Torah. Says the Rebbe, that's not just when they were created in timing, but also in their greatness. What comes before God? What's important for God? From everything else is Torah and Israel. But from those 2, which one is closer to God, is more precious? And that's the Jewish people. And therefore the Torah commands the Jewish people how to connect to God, but the Torah is there to allow the Jewish people to be closer to God. And therefore, that's the idea that at the end of the entire books, we read about breaking and violating the Torah to save another Jew. In other words, now we are bringing it a full circle. We know the real reason God created the universe, or what's important for God, is the Torah and the Jewish people. We don't know which one is greater, but here we see that the Jewish people are serving God through the Torah, and they're coming close. Comes the Torah and concludes itself by telling us that Moshe broke the Torah to show us that the Jewish people are more valuable than the Torah. And therefore, if a Jew is going to be wiped out because he did not obey God based on the Torah commandments, the Torah shouldn't be here. And that's why Moshe, and that's why it's the conclusion, it's the greatest achievement of Moshe. Why? The best thing that the Torah can do is bring a Jew closer to God. If the Torah will achieve that by breaking the Torah, that's the right thing to do. And that's why the entire Torah ends with the breaking of the tablet. And the Rebbe says that's the idea of Simchat Torah. That's why we finish off Simchat Torah, we conclude the Torah and begin again, because it's the time when we are united with God. During the 7 days of Sukkot, every day we bring sacrifices for the other nations of the world. If you read about the Sukkot sacrifices, you count 70 sacrifices over 7 days. And the reason is because Jewish people pray and care about the nations of the world. They want them to be successful. They want them to have rain. They want them to have peace. Because if they have peace and tranquility and wealth, everybody else is happy. Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, the 8th day, is one sacrifice. It's the Jewish people and God alone. At that time, when we come together, that's when we read in the Torah which part? The part that God broke the Torah, because it was for connecting the Jew closer to God. And the best way to do it is when we are united as Jewish people, and then the Torah will be there to serve it, to bring us closer to God, because when we are united as one, God is much closer to us. We study the Torah, God is even closer to us. And that's why the greatness of Moshe is to teach us the purpose of the Torah. The purpose of the Torah to bring a Jew closer to God. And that's why God says to him, Isha Koach. And that's why the last Rashi text is Va'ashabrem, is about breaking, because the breaking of the Torah serves God much greater than the study of Torah in that case. Because in that case, if the Torah would not be broken, then you would have a doubt which one is more important, the Jew or God, the Jew or Torah. Now that he broke the Torah, it is to show us the Jewish people are the greatest value, the greatest connection to God. God valued them. Thank you very much, and happy Sukkot.